like we do. Where are you right now? Are you in the States or are you in your home?
I'm at my base in Mexico.
In Mexico. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, awesome. Once again, thank you. I'm going to just admit some of these people here. And I'm going to make sure everybody knows to go ahead and mute themselves. I have the most incredible pleasure tonight of interviewing and chatting and spending some time and sharing some truth with the most incomparable Sacha Stone. Just an amazing man, absolutely amazing man. Welcome to this episode of To Thine Own Self Be True, the I Am That I Am. This series features people like Sacha who have stayed true to themselves no matter what's gone down, you know, in spite of, to spite, and maybe just despite the darkness that's tried to take us over. But you've done an amazing job, and I'm absolutely thrilled to spend this time with you. Awesome.
Thank you, Brenda. That's very kind of you. Forgive me. I'm going to try and change my network to a stronger one. Just hold a sec. I might drop it. I'll be right back. I can see that the screen is staggering a bit, so I'm going to just switch network. Hold the line.
All right.
Hello.
Hi.
Brenda, that should be better. I'm on a much stronger network now.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you know, I'm out in the boonies, and so my stuff's lag a little bit sometimes too. It's the trials of the trade, I guess.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. So, Sacha, I have a list of questions, and I'm not used to going this route with it. I usually like to flow with things, but and generally I'm fairly informal. But I understand that we need to get some of these questions into the open here, and some of these answers out for us. You know, you do amazing work. You have so many things on the go. You know, the Arise Guerrilla Network, which I'm a member of, and the wonderful Lazarus initiative, and all of these wonderful things. First of all, you know, I don't know how you managed to do it all. Like, there's just so many things. You're a part of the International Tribunal as well. I mean, that's just remarkable work you're doing. Have you always lived your truth? Is my first question.
It's a leading question. You know, insofar as I'm number one, I have to recall. I think the short answer is yes. I've certainly had to sit myself down on multiple occasions and wag a stick and pull myself into true form. But then if I go down that road, then I need to confess that I have to do that every single day, and pull oneself into true form, because the mind has a remarkable tendency to take one into false light. It seems to be the seminal function of mind to explore false light and reflections and projections. Why? In order to ultimately reflect the geometry of our lesser self back to our greater self, which is the one that bears witness. And ultimately, the one that bears witness hopefully prevails. And that is, of course, the I am that you refer to. So the answer is yes and no in equal measure. I've not always been true to self. I've certainly tried to be true to self, but that doesn't necessarily mean being true to self. It took me an awful long time to learn how to navigate the false light reflection of the diminished self, and to move into true form with the capitalized self, the one that bears witness, doesn't judge, is only capable of witnessing, and of, in that sense, loving and being loved. So that's the I am. And of course, as one enters the flame of the I am, it becomes a very, very critical passage, and a very, very difficult one initially, because one needs to burn in that flame before you hit the still point. And it hurts like hell. And that, of course, is the dross being separated. And that is the alchemical process of purification and the reckoning that takes place when one dares to engage one's own divinity in this temporal realm. So I'll leave it at that. But the answer is yes and no in equal measure. But once one gets into the flame of the I am, it becomes almost impossible to escape it, because everything else is a vacuum by contrast. Everything else is shallow by contrast. And the only true relationship that can be had is with one's higher self, which is the umbilical to divinity, so to speak. And all other relationships in this temporal realm are simply way signs toward that meeting with the beloved. And the beloved is always the divided aspect of self. You know?
Well said. Well said, my friend. That's good. Oh, you are so articulate. I love the way you speak, the way you illustrate things. You're actually, you're very poetic as you speak, always. And I really, truly appreciate that. It's very deep. It's very
well,
deep.
thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. So I wanted to know, question number 3 is basically, what are your thoughts on the current evolutionary state of this world? I mean, we're in the throes of reformation, really, and the breaking down of everything that was in turn to create this new world. What do you think of that?
Well, I can only ever view the geometry of now, which in that sense is the status quo that you referred to. I can only truly ever apprehend or regard the geometry of now as being perfect always in all ways. And again, that leads us back to the still point of the I am. The I am can only bear witness, not judge, bear witness. And when one is in a state of witness and not in a state of judgment or condemnation, then one can only see ever the perfection in the geometry of now. Even if one is standing on a bloodied battlefield in the middle of some thermonuclear fucking Atlantean, galactic war, it doesn't really matter how grotesque or how sensational the scenario in front of one. It doesn't matter. One's capacity to bear witness in the still point is everything, which is to disidentify from the sensations or the sensationalism, the psycho-emotional drama, not to identify with it, just to bear witness. And indeed, we are going through a bloodied battleground, a battlefield right now. And it is, in fact, a galactic war playing out in the 3D temporal realm.
Yeah.
The human beings who are variously lost to their divinity and to their reason and to their conscience. And we know who we're talking about, the ones who are choosing to disguise themselves behind the facade of governments and social security and the high street, consumerism, banking, doctors and nurses and teachers, the Catholic Church, the intercessionary, which describes our entire civilizational culture. So those amongst us who believe that the bank serves us, or that doctoring serves our health, or that lawyers serve justice, or even worse, judges serve justice. Anyone who believes that the government's out there to really look after you. Anyone who thinks that the Public Health Administration gives a fuck about your health. Anyone who thinks that any of those interventionist superstructures care about the pulse of humanity, those people are lost to themselves. They're lost to their divine reason and to their divine conscience. And that's a a sad thing to bear witness to if one were to allow an emotional attachment to the thing you're witnessing. But one must never make that mistake of attaching psycho-emotionality to what one is witnessing. The point of witness is to withhold all judgment and to recognize and to surrender in that sense to the divine geometry of isness, that which is, that which self-exists, self-reveals, self-fulfills in the living now. That is always the way that the universal field reflects back to the witness and offers the path of least resistance to the highest outcome, provided one doesn't identify psycho-emotionally with what one is seeing or witnessing, and simply recognize that we're seeing projections in the field. We're seeing holographic projections of ideation, of egoism, of false light. And yes, it might look like a war. It might look like a galactic war. It might look like a battlefield in the Napoleonic era. It might look like, a bunch of, Zulus coming at you with assegai and spears. It doesn't matter what vector of time space you've been caught up in. If you make the mistake of identifying with the drama, you will die to it. Absolutely. If, however, you can withhold judgment absolutely and maintain absolute stillness, even better than stillness, serendipity, equanimity, absolute harmonium in this living moment. I've done this on a number of occasions in my own life when I've had life-threatening situations. I'm talking about guns in the mouth and horrible situations in the course of the work that I've done in the past. And I've seen how that plays out, how the still point and the state of witness and non-judgment in that life, so-called life-threatening scenario becomes the Christed cloak, becomes the quanta of Daniel in the lion's den. And it's a beautiful thing because that same auric protection, so to speak, is afforded to each one of us. No one comes into this world without their angelic host. No one. Each of us have a divine angelic avatar, an incredible being of limitless power, majesty, and immanence, and wisdom. Every last sordid little human being, no matter how tawdry the incarnation, has a guardian in that sense. And when one convenes relationship with that guardian, and then recognizes that that guardian is constantly inviting you to move into the angelic seeding, your own default, your pattern of perfection, then one recognizes that one can walk through the valley of death and fear no ill, and there's never nothing will befall you and harm you for sure, so long as you are in that sense on the front foot and in the knowing of your divinity and your immanence. But that becomes a very, very hard thing for, I think, for the average mortal to be able to recognize within themselves. And the reason being that we've been so downgraded, genetically speaking, and psychologically, emotionally, culturally, intellectually, spiritually, diminished. Everything in the great lie that we call history, that we can look at, is an indicator of the diminishment of our genius and our supernature. Every fucking war and every exchange, historical transaction and exchange of governments in 1776 and your democracy and all that crap, bad totems, all of that stuff simply speaks to the systemic downgrading and diminishment of us from our angelic seeding. And the irony, of course, is we're led to believe that that's all great glorious stuff that we should, wave the flag and the banner and sing the anthem. And then so continues the dream spell, inviting us into the trial of separation, inviting us ever further away from our divinity and our majesty. So I do acknowledge that what I say is highfalutin in a sense, and it may be difficult for the average mundane human being to take on board. I do recognize that, but I also recognize the universal truth of it. And so I will speak plainly to the matter.
Yeah, that was excellent. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I can't say it like Sacha, but it's interesting. You spoke of immortality, really. And earlier today, I had the pleasure of sharing some time with Patricia Corey, and she spoke of immortality. And that whole, when you recognize yourself to be that divine being, when you acknowledge that you are eternal, then fear doesn't necessarily need to come into it the way we would normally fear as a human. Isn't that true? Yeah.
Well, that's true. But remember that fear is only an extension of the idea of time. And time is actually the thing we should apprehend, not so much fear. The fear is simply an extension of time. And the time is the great fiction. And our adherence to it, to the idea of time, is where the false light, the great Luciferic thrall issues. Once we make the fatal mistake, or perhaps fated mistake, of believing in the fiction of time and applying the designate of time to our existence, to our expression, and begin this heinous downward death spiral into entropy in every manner imaginable, which describes the great fall, of course. The great fall could only have occurred under the thrall of the lords of time. And once we recognize in this veil of tears the fiction of time, which I did, incidentally, in 1997, I believe it was the third week of August, something like that, in 1997. And I remember that was my departure from time. In one perfect moment in time, I nested perfectly into the atom seed of the fiction of time with full attention. And on that day, I nested into timelessness, which was the still point contained within the fiction of time. And I recognized through the application of very advanced mathematics at that time, which was M-set mathematics. Anyone who understands Mandelbrottian mathematics will know what I'm talking about here. But I saw in a perfect moment the alpha and omega of the fiction of time, and the time equated to fear, equated to entropy, equated to the death spiral. So if one talks about immortality or immanence, one is beginning to speak to the flame of pure truth by simply uttering the word immortal or immortality, and then to lay claim to immortality, immanence as our true divine birthright actually becomes the great adventure. And curiously enough, that's exactly where we're headed through this valley of death, this Covidius sea that we're departing. And it's not over by a long chalk. The playbook has only begun. The theatrical production is only just kind of getting into its stride. So the Luciferic theater will continue, by my reckoning, for at least another 7 to 8 years, at least. But I do believe that within 7 to 8 years, it comes to more or less a plateau. The grand fury of the Luciferic deception ends in our lifetime. It moves into a plateau beyond 2020, 2030, more or less that dateline. And by my reckoning, we move steadily at that point toward the vertical ascension event, which I genuinely, forgive me, believe to be occurring simultaneous to the micronova event, which will occur in 2046. That's a play that is set by the sun, moon, and stars. And one can set one's Rolex watch by it. But the irony here is that one ought not to set one's watch by it. One ought to step into the geometry of now and activate one's psionic capacitance, one's fully alive and alert intuitive body, because that is the creature that transcends time and that sees through the fiction of time. That is the body that starts to awaken and revivify the entropy at the molecular, cellular, and atomic level within the building blocks of our bodies, our biological systems. So we are on the threshold of immortality. I say that plainly because I know it. I've already seen it. I saw how it's going to occur. It's crystal clear to my gaze, and my gaze is crystal clear. And that's why I speak plainly and clearly to things, because there is no enclosure, there's no inhibition in my mind, because my mind in that sense has convened with the quantum mind, which is our birthright. All of us, we own that. We own the alpha and the omega, each one of us, provided we know it, provided we have the common sense, for fuck's sake, and the grace to be able to take our throne and put our crown on our head and behold the reflection of self in all its majesty and glory, and see in that reflection our divinity, our immanence. There is no separation between us and source, so to speak. And of course, along trundles the reductive Christian idiots and the reductive Muslim idiots and Hindu idiots and Buddhist idiots, and we'll all start, harumphing at the fact that we've tossed their idols, onto the pyre.
Yeah.
But we must do that. We must have the courage to do that and to kill the sacred cows.
Absolutely. And reclaim our sovereignty, right? Just own that sovereignty truthfully and wholly. Holy and holy, I guess, is a good
yes,
way
well, sovereignty in its truest expression is actualized consciousness. Actualized consciousness in its truest sense is pure sovereignty. And pure sovereignty and pure actualized consciousness are our divinity incarnate in the third density field of expression. The problem, again, is, as I alluded earlier, is that we have been so dream-spelled and psycho-civilizationally programmed into reductivism, into diminishment, into believing the very worst in our natures, in our character. And we look into the mirror and think we're getting older, because we are indeed a year older. And because we think we're getting older, we begin to age. We are the ones projecting plasma into the mirror, a very, very dangerous thing to do, incidentally. Mirrors are very, very powerful things. And when you project prana, life force, plasma, through photonic coding in the eyes from Kundalini into a mirror, and you beam a message back at yourself, oh, fuck, I'm getting old. Oh, God, the hairs, oh, God. If you make that mistake and do that on a daily basis, you are going to age, baby. Yeah. If you learn the craft of stopping that, cease and desist, just stop it. Stop paying homage to the lords of time. Stop feeding your plasma, your prana, your life force into the great Luciferic fiction. And for sure as hell, stop paying coin to Caesar, because Caesar, or your friendly government, is the extension of the Lord of Time as it relates to harvesting your work, your slave labor, your time, and your motion, which is your life force. It's all the same thing, just in different aspects. So when one steps into pure sovereignty and pure consciousness, one also, by distinction, steps into one's divinity. And that's a beautiful thing.
It certainly is. Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a great answer too. I'm having such a good time already. And Joanne said that you're just kind of like a quirky uncle. So we're because I was really nervous, to be honest with you, because I've followed you for a little while now, and I see the people you speak to, and you communicate with, and I always said, you speak my language anyway, but I was really thrilled when I was able to connect with you in this way. So you basically just answered question number 4, which is all about your thoughts on sovereignty, the Luciferian Illuminati cabal, and the WEF and the evils, the Dr. Evils that are at the helm.
Let's talk about them. Forgive me, but I didn't address the Babylonian priesthood and the cabal. I haven't addressed them, and I'm very happy to do so momentarily if you'd like me to.
Absolutely.
So the key piece here in my mind is to step into, again, a state of witness when one is apprehending the idea of a Babylonian priesthood or a satanic coven or a brotherhood of the snake, of any of these expressions of the great divide. And when one is in a state of witness, apprehending these things, and not judging, one can only ever see, again, the perfection in these icons, these archetypes, these totems. Because if a wizard with a pointy hat appears on my radar screen in life, waving its wand at me or trying to do some dastardly action in my life, that is for a very good reason. In the first instance, the geometry of my soul has called upon that event horizon. That's owning it. Sovereignty 101, owning the now. You are not a victim of anything or anyone ever. You make the mistake of believing you are, you fucked up. You've just taken a left fork in the road. And you've got to come back on track. You are never a victim of anything or anyone ever, ever, ever. When you get that piece, you begin to understand what sovereignty is. You begin to recognize that no matter how shitty the circumstance is that you're facing, or the event that you are finding yourself in, or the relationship that you are finding yourself in, it doesn't matter how awful it is. You have convened it. It was the signature of your soul, your frequency, that conjured this into manifestation in the now. Own that, and you now have the power to remove it, to absolve it, to redeem it, to blow it out of the hologram. But if you make the mistake of believing that you are a victim to it or of it, it will own you in the now, and it will take you further into its labyrinth. That stuff that you learn, the alchemy of wisdom, aging, you begin to learn that craft. So I suggest the best way to regard the devils and the witches and the warlocks and the priesthoods and the creepy crawlies is to recognize that they are Zen masters. I've said this multiple times in the last year or two, especially when one is looking at horrible archetypes in the world. And we could all name them, the evil billionaires who are behind the COVIDiocy and the evil warmongering, politicians, and so on. But each of these creatures are doing, by best accounts, carrying out their divine remit. When I did a fair amount of work with Alejandro Ferradas and Elena Bensonov on deploying scalar, double-blind placebo scalar readings, soul frequency readings of historical icons and of contemporaneous icons like evil people in history and in the present. And the one thing we learned from that body of work was that the Anthony Faucis of this world are fulfilling their divine mission perfectly. They are 100% in alignment with divine purpose and with personal purpose. Wow. That tells us that Anthony Fauci is doing what he was mandated to do and to be.
Absolutely.
Now, the question becomes, what was it about the collective oversoul that was so lacking that it required the conjuring of that kind of deviant archetype into the field to punish us and to stick lethal injections into our babies? That becomes the question. So let's resolve that aspect of self individually and collectively, and then those icons, archetypes do not manifest. We move into the kingdom of heaven very quickly. That's what the whole New Earth metric and the New Earth Horizon, my life's work, and the initiatives and organizations that I spearhead are all geared toward that, toward a remedy, and then the revelation of pure truth, the enactment and embodiment of right action, and the immersion into our own capacity to manifest the kingdom of heaven on earth in our lifetime. Why not? Why not? Everything suggests that's exactly what we ought to be doing. We should, all of us, be conjuring bliss and euphoria into this earthly plane. And we'll do it. The battle is, in my view, already won. Well, the war certainly is won, in my view. Maybe a few skirmishes left, a bit of collateral, a bit of detoxing, a bit of, shedding of the old scales and all of that. But even that process should be a joyful one. Certainly it is for me. I'm beginning to recognize how beautiful all of this witchery and bedevilment is that we see around us, and how stark it is. Because I'm old enough to be able to reflect and go back to the 1970s, the 1980s, and to remember how lost in the dream spell we were, how we knew something was wrong in the basement, but we couldn't quite put our finger on it. Wars and disease and poverty and afflictions everywhere, but couldn't quite work out what assuming that that's just the way it is, the way the world is. But we're all in it together, and the governments and the churches and the high street, we're all trying to find solutions to problems. Fuck that. No, we are not trying to find solutions to problems, and our government is doing everything to prevent the solutions from reaching the marketplace, because solutions, baby, and peace, baby, is not good for the Babylonian business plan.
No, it's not. Oh my God. Absolutely. And that's the whole thing. It is one hell of a magic spell they've put on the whole of humanity. Black magic in its finest form. This is what we see. And, it's up to us to really light it all up and expose the evil in this world so that we can literally bring about that new earth that you're speaking of. And I absolutely love that. That was fabulous. You've created that movement, that New Earth Horizon and the Lazarus Initiative and all of those. That's a massively transformative movement. And I just wondered what your total intention is for the outcome of that. Like, what are you breathing into being there for us, for the whole of the
world? I'm really not, I don't have an objective, so I can't lie to you and try to state an objective, because there isn't one. I've never woken up one day of my life and planned I'm terrible at that stuff. I don't have a diary or a schedule. I refuse to acknowledge clocks. I don't have watches or clocks anywhere near me. I won't look at them even on a computer screen. If I didn't have Joanne and other staffers kindly cracking whips over me or beating me around the back of the head with a baseball bat from time to time, I wouldn't turn up for anything ever. But I'm lucky in that sense. I have an infrastructure there, but I don't set alarms. I refuse to have a clock. So there's no possibility of me, being up at 8 o'clock in the morning for anything ever. I'm curious enough, I wake up before that time, but I'm just very disidentified with time and motion and objectives in that sense. So I can't lie to you and try to manifest or manufacture a reason for why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think that as you've raised the specter of it, I can look at it in the now and recognize that the Lazarus symposiums, which I do every month now, and the Lazarus Initiative I set up in order to try to force a conversation into the field that was a very blatantly quantum conversation, one which did not conform to any metric, but was concerned only with our resurrection of ourselves from this valley of death. Because I could see a year and a half ago, leading up to the launch of the Lazarus Initiative, I had gone through 2020, which was, I think, the worst year of my life for many, many reasons, which I won't go into here. But it was a diabolical year for me. The agony was unbearable. I suffered hugely in that year, and my way of dealing with it was to throw myself into service, to throw myself even further into, I guess, selfless action, which becomes service to self, of course. And so I threw myself into this, an initiative called Reclaim Your Lives, which I set up and drummed up a hell of a lot of noise with a lot of the great medical scientists around the world, and brought them and their voices together, including Bobby Kennedy Jr., people of great stature in that arena, and started bringing all these voices together and creating an orchestra of consensus around the insanity which we could see. And that Reclaim Your Lives issued off the back of a World Health Sovereignty Summit, which I staged in 2019 at my base in Bali, and brought many of the world's leading activists in geoengineering to vaccination programs. And then I staged also in late 2019 the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the weaponization of the biosphere. That was in June of 2019, only 4 months before the Wuhan outbreak, because I could see that we were facing a grave epochal travesty was coming to this earth. I didn't know where or how or when. I just knew it was going to happen. And I knew it was to do with the weaponization of the biosphere. And so I staged that judicial commission, and anyone who wants to see it can go to the commission.itnj.org and see the great body of work that we did. So for me, it was stepping stones just unfolding, the World Health Sovereignty Summit, which was calling on the world to wake the fuck up and step into health sovereignty whilst you still can. I mean, how prescient was that? 6 months before, the world's health sovereignty is ripped away from it. I'm screaming On stage, I had kings in attendance, you know, paramount chiefs, chief justices, bishops. I had, you know, powerful people. I convened them there, was screaming, claim your health sovereignty. And 6 months later, boom, it's taken. And the judicial inquiry into weaponization of the biosphere, making all this noise with all of these great activists to try and warn the world. Boom. A few months later, we all fall into this thrall of CNN and BBC and believe the script. So that led to 2020, a horrendous year for me. And Reclaim Your Lives was my way of screaming again and saying, come on, people, before they get to you and your babies, come on. It was a summit. It was a very big event. I then went on to do the Focus on Fauci, a mock trial. I brought Bobby Kennedy Jr. in with Dr. David Martin and Dr. Judy Mikovits and the great Canadian barrister Rocco Galati, and put on a mock trial of Fauci called Focus on Fauci. That was a very big, event. I then did another big summit called Line in the Sand, and again put 45 or 50 of the world's leading pundits, commentators, activists to try to conjure and get the world to pay attention to what was clearly coming down the pike. And it goes on. So that led me to the Arise tour in America when things were getting even worse at the end of 2020. And I thought, well, what now? And I thought, go harder, get real, get in the ditches, get in the mud. And then I did. I planned that out and made the mistake of, bless his heart, planning it out with Robert David Steele. He fucked up, perished on his tour because he commandeered something that wasn't his. God love him. And truly God love him. And I miss him very much. But we proceeded nonetheless, myself and Scott McKay and Lee Dundas and about 35 other great and good people like Dr. Christiane Northrup and Dr. Carrie Madej, who, God love her, just was in an airplane crash this morning, I think, and has survived by the grace of God. All of the great and good activists on the Arise tour, 3-month coast-to-coast tour, which near as damn it almost killed me last year. Certainly killed 6 people on the tour, our people. You know, it was a very scary 3 months. And one day we'll talk about it. One day we'll speak plainly about what happened. But that was diving further in, trying to touch. I wanted to touch the pulse of Middle America because I believe so very much in the pulse of Middle America. When I could see the rest of the world was beginning to move towards condemnation of America for all the wrong reasons. When Middle America has always been the Christed aspect of humanity, the good Christian, and I'm not deferring just to Christians here, but it's principally Christian. That Middle American pulse is the most sacrosanct, beautiful, holy, and precious pulse, in my view. I get very, very defensive about America. It's why I wore a fucking American flag around my shoulders for years, since 2012. I'm not a patriot. I don't even like patriotism. I become a patriot because of what it now means to be a patriot. A patriot now is everything that's against the establishment, you know. But the point I'm making is I just recognize that Middle America and the pulse of Middle America is the pulse of humanity. And if that stays intact, and it is intact, and I saw that with my own eyes, and I embraced tens of thousands of people on that 3-month coast-to-coast tour. I exchanged trillions of spike proteins, and I was very, very sick for most of the tour as a direct result of that, I'll have you know. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, because I needed to see that for myself. I needed to see that the Christed element of the pulse of humanity was alive and well, even although America is the most weaponized nation on earth, even although it's the most dangerous, weaponized government and high street and media machine and war machine on the face of the earth. It is the counterpoint of the precious human pulse that will win the day. And all the rest is fiction, as we can see now with Capitol Hill and Congress going into dissolution in Technicolor in front of our eyes. The end of this great vicious franchise called democracy, which was always a Babylonian trick, a dirty trick. People are now seeing that. People are now seeing that democracy equals the lowest common denominator prevailing and making the determinations in this case being that the government is now a satanic enterprise seeking to intervene in your DNA and genocide its own people. Well, if that's not a perfect example of Cronus, the crown, the Titan, Cronus, the Titan that devours its own young, which is what the crown, the state is, government is, was only ever that, you know. It's beautiful when one can see the geometry of these things. Excuse me, I'm going to have to plug in my computer. Give me 1 second. It's about to go out. I'm just going to grab the plug. Give me 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
All good.
Beautiful. Yeah, you know, the am that is America, I think is the central point for this whole experience to sort of evolve from and through. I think it is a beautiful hot mess we're experiencing here. It's you know, it's crazy when you think about it, but I have to wonder sometimes if it wasn't planned as the ultimate show. You know, I mean, it is showtime, and it is, I never saw it coming this way. I've been reading for people for many, many years now, and always saying, you know, well, there's this grand event about to happen, and I had no idea they were going to roll it out like this. I mean, it just blew me away, and I'm like, they cannot be fucking serious here. Like, really? But they are. They are doing their damnedest to make it all so.
But the who is the they, Brenda? We have to stop identifying it as a them or a them and us. We have to see them as being, again, Zen masters that are serving the divided aspect of self. The unresolved aspect of self playing out in the field comes back at us as them. And the minute we recognize this, that the them is the unresolved aspect of us, then we can make peace. And we are always the ones in command, in control of the process of redemption and absolution, which is the greatest gift of the Christed human, is the capacity to absolve and to redeem. You know?
Yeah. Forgiveness is everything, and compassion. You know, and I often look at the, you know, the evil ones of this world who are perpetrating this against humanity. You know, as this child who is forced to leave the party before his time. He doesn't want to go, or she doesn't want to go, and they're kicking and screaming and thrashing about, you know, and doing all of this stuff. But I mean, ultimately, it's necessary in some way for some of us to wake up. I mean, there's a lot of people who are still sleeping.
Well, again, they are not doing anything to us that we are not permissioning.
That's right.
And if you continue to pay coin to Caesar, that is what you get. That's the equation. I don't pay coin to Caesar, and I urge everyone to stop paying coin to Caesar. I urge everyone to pay merchant taxes, business taxes. I think that's right and proper. But to pay personal income taxes is satanic. It is you literally empowering the kingdom of the devil and allowing babies' heads to be blown off in Sudan. Why would you do that, you know, with a clean conscience? So yeah, it becomes, it calls, you know, this kind of morality calls into question every part that we play in the status quo and how we grant permissions to the them that are perpetrating stuff against us. Yeah, I am entirely responsible for everything that manifests in the field on my radar screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And responsibility is solely ours. You know, I've often said that the I in the middle is the only one you can really be able to respond to, right? Is the I, and with the I that you are. That's really, it's really a powerful point to make, you know, for everyone. And it is, when you come to that place of oneness too, you realize that eventually we're all going to go home to the same spot. We might be doing it a little differently than the other people or the other beings are, but we're all eventually going home to the creative source, the prime creator, and you know, really just maybe starting a whole new journey, doing something else somewhere else, you know, who knows. But that's pretty remarkable, that perspective for sure. So, you know, I have the next question. I have to say, you've connected with some of the most incredible people of this time. And I have to say that I think my favorite interview, like all of the ones you spoke up earlier, like the Arise movement and, you know, that tribunal, that I watched that one with Rocco. Actually, it was really cool. I was like, I'm sure I've seen Sacha with Rocco on something, and I can't remember what it was, but you just reminded me. Thank you. I think my favorite interview you've ever done is Ronald Bernard. I have to say that I love that man, and I loved your interview with him. It was incredible, and he's such a beautiful soul. You know, he really, really is. What's your favorite interview, would you say? If you could choose at least one, anyway. I know you've seen so many.
You know, that's really unfair and very difficult, because I think not to preen in front of your audience, but I think I've probably done more interviews than any other activist in the world. I think I'm the most saturated in that, and not by design, but because I don't have a family. I don't have children. I chose to immerse myself. And I got the date wrong earlier. It was the 1st of August, 1997. Incidentally, it just completely came back to me a short while ago. But the moment I departed from the fiction of time, I knew that I had to immerse myself.
Oh, you've hit your mute, my friend.
I decided to immerse myself fully in the process. And that's what I've been doing for an awful long time. 1997, I was 25 years ago. That's a quarter of a century, you know. So I've not stopped since that time. There's not a day that I've taken off in 25 years. I can safely say that. I've never taken a day off in 25 years. Never. I travel a great deal. I'm constantly moving. I'm very blessed, and I keep great company a lot of the time, and I am invited into hallowed places, and I'm very, very, in that sense, worldly wise and very, very fortunate. My life is constantly interesting and stimulating. But then that's because I'm on the front foot. I'm demanding that it stimulates me. I'm demanding that it ups my game. I'm demanding that the next face or voice or, you know, or feature is something that augments this experience and that takes this conversation forward or further or deeper. So that's just the integrity of my mission, you know. But yeah, no regrets. I'm saturated. I've done a lot of media interviews. Who have I enjoyed the most? Well, if I would tell you that there is a grandmother called Jackie White, who you may never have heard of and may never hear of, who I absolutely adore. She's interviewed me 3 or 4 times, and I will never say no to her. And she comes on with her bifocals on, and she's just lovely. She is just, for me, she's somewhere in the countryside in England, and she's radical, man. And every time I sit and get interviewed with Jackie White, I could go on for 6 hours. She's like, that for me is where I'm happiest, when I'm speaking to someone with such simplicity and grace and poise. That's when I'm happiest, for sure. I love, of course, I love interacting with, folks like David Icke, who I love David very much. And I've known him for a long, long time. And it's always beautiful exchanging with great minds and great hearts. And I'm lucky that I've just done hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands by now. And I'm still looking for, where to augment the conversation. But I think who comes to mind for me would be grandmother Jackie White, in the middle of nowhere in Middle England.
Wonderful. Well, I hope to catch some of those interviews at some point for sure. Yeah, amazing. And I watched the Lazarus symposiums. I actually caught your solstice broadcast last week. It was phenomenal. You had some really amazing people on there. Just from everywhere too. It was quite amazing. When you love your work, you don't really work, do you? It's just who you are, and it's just a beautiful expression of the being that you be. And we all truly appreciate it, I must say. Anybody who's ever spent time watching you, I can say for myself especially, that, and those I've spoken to and in my own circles, that we all truly appreciate you and the beautiful being that you are, doing what you do so naturally, so easily, so divinely, we must say. And, this whole living your work and just being that expression of love for what you do and who you are, and what you be, that's such an amazing example for people, to just go to be that, do that, and don't worry about time, don't do this, don't be constricted, don't be restricted, all of those things. Just be free and just love what you do, and you do it so well. You really do.
Well, thank you very much. Those are very kind words. Thank you.
My pleasure. My goodness. Recently I saw you interviewed those who do the Nuremberg 2.0 trial.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of them today. What do you see coming out of that? Like, we've got a couple of different movements. Here in Canada, we have the Canadian Rights Watch movement has joined up with the American Rights Watch, and they are, formulating this wonderful lawsuit. And Rocco Galati's got his own stuff going on. What do you see? Like, do you think there's going to be trials? Like, these guys are going to be held accountable, or are we just going to move through this?
Without a doubt. Process? No. Without a doubt, it can only go that way. That's just that's mathematics. Yeah, there will be trials, and the deviants will be held to task. But here's the thing: I rather suspect that the deviants will be dead in the main. I don't think they will have survived, because from what I'm seeing, it's idiots in Wall Street, idiots in the corporatocracy, who are all rolling their sleeves up for their boosters. This is the curious thing. It's that devilish cloak of doom has really cast itself across their own number. Mm-hmm. And I rather suspect that they're going to be moving into entropy and moving off world. I don't think we're going to have, in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, I don't think we're going to have many of these deviants running around the streets. Having said that, let's go quite deep into this area for a moment and recognize an awful truth. And that is that these idiot proxy humans who have been, in a sense, demonically possessed to do the kind of insidious evil that they've been doing, they are collateral. They are of no consequence. So they are being thrown under a bus. Why? Because they're no longer needed beyond a certain point. And that is because humanity has become weaponized, filled with graphene oxide, fluoride, aluminum, and glyphosate, and all of those chemical chain reactions that issue from essentially glyphosate, fluoride, and aluminum, which now you could add graphene oxide to that. Which means what? Which means that 4-5+ billion human beings have become weaponized in their microbiome, which means morphogenetically, the field of humanity has become a time bomb.
Absolutely.
And with the activation of Skynet through 5G bandwidth, we're talking about now creating a field effect where information can be broadcast into the collective human biome. So that morphogenetic field, which is actually a collective human microbiome or macrobiome, becomes a utility of the devil. Voice to skull technology, dialing information in through the ethers, into the genetics. Why do you think they hacked into the DNA? What do you think that was about? That was about gaining access, full access into Kundalini, into the prana, into the life force. So those human beings are batteries, capacitors. In goes the egregore. And all of a sudden, we've got a weaponized species. And very few of us, arguably, will be fully conscious outside of that macrobiome. That's a hideous science fiction scenario that we're actually facing. We're actually facing that. So that is probably why the earthly proxies of the devil are being thrown under a bus and are perishing themselves, because they're no longer of any need or any use. Because when the egregore is able to simply dial and beam information into the field effect of humanity, we'll see where that goes for sure. I have an idea in my own mind where that takes us and takes the world. But more importantly than that, I have a crystal clear idea of where the new Earth horizon takes us. Those of us who choose to seize the day, those of us who choose to step into that light, that horizon, we will be untouched and unblemished by the kingdom of the devil, because that force, that effect cannot gain any traction over our soul or our manifest journey. None at all.
No. And I'd like to, to think anyway that there's plenty of us purebloods left, plenty of us purebloods, non-genetically modified people who are, just standing true to themselves and standing true to what they know is natural, right? It's pure. It's not artificially or synthetically altered in any way. It's incredible what they're trying. It's really the most diabolical and yet brilliantly, incredible plan that they are trying to carry out here. But we see that they're not getting as far as they thought they would, for sure. And they, of course, being those at the helm, the Dr. Evils, will say, who are running the show here, and all those political people and whatnot. It's really, it is a diabolical, but it's a beautiful plan. And they're just not going to make it. They're just not going to get there with it, I don't believe, in my eyes anyway. Oh, man. Yeah. Divine justice and retribution. I'm all about that in this way, right? When you're attacking what God created in the way that they are, we got to do something about it. And just standing true in the light and the love of who we are, and recognizing, as you said, our divinity and the magnificence of the being that we are is the way to do it. They hate that. It's everything that they absolutely abhor. And to me, I just keep shining my light at them, and hoping that they will wither away to God knows what, but that's all good, right? I wanted to ask you about the Humanitad. that beautiful video I watched, it literally brought me to tears. I was like, oh my God, I've got to go there. I've got to be, a part of that somehow. Tell us about that. Tell us about this beautiful venture you've created.
Well, that's not Humanitad, respectfully.
No,
That's New Earth Sanctuary.
it's the
Yeah,
new
and
sanctuary. Pardon me.
that's the headquarters that we're master planning here in Bacala Laguna in Mexico. But it is a huge prospect. I'm sitting inside one of the cottages on the estate right now, and there's about over 1,000 acres of land that we've aggregated into the New Earth Sanctuary here. And we're planning over the next 3 years to manifest it as the most full spectrum, dynamic, syntropic agroforestry residential community campus for the New Earth University, a full immersion in sort of experiential immersion into consciousness, sovereignty, and living in full syntropy with other living systems. There is not, to my knowledge, any sanctuary in the world that exists even close to what I'm planning here. What I'm insisting on doing with this prospect is to manifest heaven on earth, undiluted, unabashed, unashamedly. And we will do it. We've begun the process already. And to be able to manifest heaven on earth, so to speak, is a very broad metric, which requires a multidisciplinary approach to how we establish the parameter of this engagement, how we first engage the divinations, which is the communication with the living soil and with the water. Fortuitously, we have the greatest water on earth here. The Bacala Laguna is famed for being the primal DNA of the planet, one of a handful of locations known to contain the first Genesis DNA of all living systems, and we have it in the laguna. We have almost a kilometer of laguna front on the sanctuary. The stromatolites that create the basin of this electric turquoise laguna, the word stromatolite means the existence of the first being on earth, meaning to say it's alive, it's microbial flora and fauna that contains the Genesis DNA. There's something incredibly powerful and charged and electric about this place. So that's why I chose this place at the invitation of my dear friend Kira, the journalist friend of mine who's been living here for some years, invited me, insisted that I came here. When I did, I immersed myself in the water here and everything changed. And not a day goes by when I'm not immersed in the water here now, surrounded by the horses and the sheep and the chickens and the turkeys and the coati bears and the chihuahuas. It's just divine. But we're beginning to plan out about 500 to 600 residencies on different tiers. So we'll be inviting the world in. We've a number of people have already come in and begun to make the acquisition of their plot of land within the sanctuary. So I haven't made any public pronouncements of this, and it's already moving quite rapidly just through the kind of Chinese whispers and the network close to me. So every week, more and more people are flying in to see the land, feel the land, and then get on board. A lot of people around the world want to retool and repurpose their lives into exactly this kind of engagement, where you're in a place of extraordinary natural beauty. You've got one of the greatest primary water sources on earth, and underground cenotes, crystal lakes feeding the laguna. You've got the most fertile soil imaginable. And the air and the ethers and the climate is stunning, pretty much all year round. So creating Kingdom of Heaven, if you're going to do it, this is one of the greatest places in the world you could choose to do it. And we've got the land, and it's beginning. Master planning is fully underway. And the other key piece outside of the divinations, and then obviously the business of master planning and bioarchitecting and what have you, which we're expert at anyway. We've done this in Bali in a kind of stepping stone format. So that the New Earth Haven in Bali is world renowned now, received by now millions of people have been there, and it's become a kind of a mecca in that part of the world, proving out bioresonance, bioarchitecture, the elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness in a built environment. So that was my experiment over the last few years, you know. And there were ups and downs and successes and failures, but in the main, it proved the metric. So we're extrapolating off that to here. And the land holding here is literally 1,000 times bigger than the one in Bali. You could fit Bali into this 1,000 times, literally. It's huge. And what I intend to do here is within 3 years, prove the world's first 0-point economy, where we're able to manufacture every single item that is required to meet the social ecology, including computer processors and light bulbs. We will be engineering and manufacturing everything internally within 3 years. That's my ambition. It might take a bit longer than that, but I genuinely think we can do it within 3 years because we've got the engineering, we've got the technologies, we have the innovations, we can power things up under our own steam, so to speak. So we have advanced vanguard technologies already, which we contain and own the licenses to. And that's part of the work that I've been doing in Romania with my technologies group, the United Thracia group. So we pretty much got all the ingredients to cook and bake this cake. And we intend to do so. And I've also, to some extent, got diplomatic credentials that go back quite a way, you know, United Nations and all of that shit. So I'm able to take dialogue into municipal and federal government and sit down, roll up the sleeves where necessary and do horse trading, you know, in order to create the necessary protections and garner the right kind of support. So we're not meeting bureaucratic obstacles. We've looked at everything, and again, we can grow everything on Earth, I think, except for 4 or 5 items. And so with our agriculture program and our huge farmlands, we're already planning out everything. The only thing that won't take place is the killing of, the shedding of blood. So animals will not be killed on our farmlands. If people want to eat beef in the community, it's a matter for them. No one's ever going to force rules and regulations. They will never make that mistake. But I just asked the farmers, our farmers, if they could agree that no cattle or goats or pigs would be killed on the sanctuary soil, if they could honor that. And which is a big ask because, you know, there's many, many hundreds of heads of cattle and they are bred for beef here. So it was a big ask. But they agreed to that in honor, and I'm very pleased about that. Outside of that, we will have dairy and biodynamic farming of everything you could possibly imagine. And we plan to also build our own flying cars and all those kind of wonderful, weird tools. We've got the physics. Anyone who knows me and my work and the smart people that I'm connected to and our scientists and mathematicians and engineers knows that I'm not pissing around when I say we'll be building our own flying cars. We'll be going fully into anti-gravity and all of those technologies with our own astrophysicists and rocket scientists, and we have them in-house. So there.
I actually caught that part with the helmet. That's pretty cool that you had put on that solstice broadcast. It's you know, it's really quite something, and I think that's such a beautiful concept that you have, that, you know, that you're bringing to life here. Wow. I mean, what do you think that, in a sense, that you're recreating in a way some of our incredible technology and our amazing advancement from like Atlantean times, perhaps? That's not a question on the list.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I'm painfully aware of that as a possibility. What I don't want to do is be recreating Atlantis. Why would we be that stupid? There's a reason why Atlantis fell, and there's a reason why we've been struggling to get beyond the fallen light of Atlantis even now. The depleted uranium in the atmosphere is there courtesy of the great galactic wars and the fall of Atlantis and so on. Why would we want to repeat those kinds of epoch or those cycles? But certainly some of the technology and innovation and engineering that we're involved in advancing internally is connected to off-world intelligences who are beaming the mathematics and the coding to individuals who are then feeding the information to our mathematicians and engineers. That's true. That's going on. And that's otherworldly. And I understand a lot of Christian zealots will get very upset and think that we're now trading with demons, but I'm just not interested in that discussion unless you're prepared to really sit down, shut the fuck up and learn, because I can talk about that stuff. Yes, Zeta Reticulan alien greys are demons, absolutely. But that is not to say that all off-world intelligences are demonic. It's to say that the demonic ones are demonic and the angelic ones are angelic, okay? Duh, it's not that complicated. The Arcturian and Andromedan and Pleiadian intelligences, by way of example, are profoundly beautiful and benevolent and kind and decent and wise, and to some great extent the Syrians as well. I can't speak to the Orions, but the Lyrans, amazing beings, way ahead of us, incidentally, and yet not as special as us. And don't they know it? Don't all of these galactic brethren and fellows know that the angelic human, as it becomes remembered to itself now through this valley of death, the angelic human, the rekindled, reconstituted angelic human is the great prize of this cosmos. And the song in our DNA is the great prize, because we are indeed the galactic hybrid of all of the above. And we beat the demon in that sense. We overruled and overcame the demonic, draconian aspect of our genetic interventionism that we suffered over multiple incarnations, over multiple ages. And the angelic DNA has come through, nonetheless, fully intact, fully connected to source, and acts as the Jacob ladder for all of creation now to find its own way back home.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is why I've said that that's why they want to distort the DNA. You know, they want to do what they do best and just, you know, bring everything to a non-natural space. But we are angelic DNA. We are truly the most beautiful species. I think that we, you know, that we are these incredible beings who lost our way because we were pushed over the edge to lose that. But we're reclaiming it more and more. And Alex Collier says, you know, that we are that beautiful royalty, galactic royalty. And I love that term because we really are. We are, you know, this most incredible species that, you know, all of those beings that you spoke of, all of those nations and species, they do, you know, want to take care of us. Those ones who are benevolent, they want to take care of us because we are so special. We really are. It's amazing, isn't it? Quite.
Indeed.
Quite. Wow, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure, and I know I've taken you much more than a little longer than the hour, but I do appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to share or speak to before we close off? I did ask basically what your message is for the world, but I think you've said it
No,
very
that's
well.
very kind of you. I'm not selling anything particularly, other than inviting people to go to the Lazarus Initiative.com. And if anyone's interested in participating in this incredible conversation, then sign up to the symposiums and to the journal, because that's where the real conversation is being had. But outside of that, people are also free to visit the New Earth Horizon.com, which is the new portal that we just launched this last week, which is the New Earth, and all of the initiatives and organizations are all kind of nested there. And I believe that sachastone.com also launched finally in the last few days. I confess I haven't seen the website myself, but I intend to this weekend. But I'm glad that we've got a good web presence now on our own secure servers in Iceland, so we can't be taken down by the Google Gestapo yet again.
And they do try, don't they? So Mexico is a free space? Can people travel there without any kind of medical procedures needed?
I'm
Or
not
is it
a
still
tourist authority, and it keeps changing, but it's never had that. Mexico has always been free for people to travel to, and doesn't pay attention to vaccinations and all that nonsense. So yeah, very, very open and egalitarian in that sense.
gotta like it, considering, right? I've heard a lot of Canadians are departing this country and heading there. So, I
Well,
can
that's
see
true.
why.
That's true. We've had a number of Canadians come already and are purchasing plots of land within the sanctuary, and very goodly people as well. I've got a lot of very good Canadian friends, and I'm loving the caliber of consciousness and intelligence that comes out of Canada, especially those that are choosing to get the hell out of Canada.
No, no. I'm not leaving. I'm staying, and I'm fighting this fight. I don't
Well,
really
good,
care.
good, 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 good for you. Good for you. I salute you and applaud you. I only hope that you make it. I'm afraid I have little faith in Canada, and Australia, having just observed the trajectory of wickedness. Not just Australia and Canada, actually all Commonwealth countries which are contained by the Crown of England and backed up by the Vatican, are very, very weaponized, very dangerous. And I just suggest it's not going to be much of a fun ride for those people who choose to surf inside the boundary. But God bless you for your courage.
Well, I happen to love this country. I don't like who's running it. Got myself a fuck Trudeau flag hanging in the front window. But
Yeah, good for you.
yeah, well, that you gotta speak your truth. And I'm not shy about it. I really not. But I do know that, I realized that Australia and Canada were somewhat of the pilot projects in a way to see how things were going to go, because we
Yeah.
were relatively, fairly free, and that's why a lot of people come here to live here, and
Yes,
the
that's right.
Commonwealth. But I do believe too that there's a dismantling happening within the corporations, within the Bank of Canada, within the, all of those that, the United Kingdom and all of that. And I want to see them fall. I want to be here for that. I don't want to watch it on TV. I want to see it firsthand, standing there with my flag and my little signs, doing what I do, and really just be a part of that transformation, because it is happening. And the 2030 agenda that followed right on the heels of the 2021, they've got a plan in place, but and an agenda to boot with it. But I don't think it's going to fly the way they want it to. And I think that more and more Canadians, we're passive here, like it's such a peaceful place. And I've often said that we Canadians will often, apologize for having our foot underneath yours when you've stepped on it, kind of idea. But more and more we're getting our hockey sticks up, and we're starting to walk the streets more and more. We've had some good freedom rallies here, but I think they're waking up more and more as they definitely go after the children and things like that. And it takes us a little bit, but once we get going, look the fuck out, which is what I want to say. So I'm trusting that my fellow Canadians will, I mean, and here are the Indigenous people. It just blew my mind at how many of them were willing to believe in a government that has never even provided them with clean water, rolling up their sleeves. Oh, we have special treatment. We're being cared for. Well, when the hell do you think that started? It's not happening now. So why are you falling for it? But they are in some cases, and God bless every one of them. But everybody's chosen their path. Everybody is free will here for as long as it lasts us, and everybody's allowed to do what they want to do. And I'm open to allowing them to do it. My heart might hurt for them a little bit, but you know, we all make our choices, and that's, I think, the beauty of free will and sovereignty, really. But you know, we'll see what happens here in Canada as long as I can stand it. Anyway, if not, you might find me down in Mexico, banging on the door saying, "Hey, let me in." You never know. Sacha Stone, it's been an absolute honor and a thrill for me. I was really nervous, but Joanne said, "Oh, he's really great." So, you know, I'm like, I know he's great. It's just I'm a little nervous because I'm kind of new at this stuff. But I really appreciate your time. I know it's very precious. And although you don't wear a watch, I know I've taken you for a little bit more than what you had maybe anticipated. But God bless you for all that you do. And one last thing, you know, aside from the others, you mentioned something earlier that perhaps we could look at it wasn't the trial, it was something else you'd mentioned, and my mind is just swimming now. But if you could just, you know, I can't even remember what it was now. Somebody was asking about a shared link too, but I'll make sure I find it and I'll pass it along to everybody. And I wish you.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, Brenda. Very, very kind of you, and very, very good to meet your friends here. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you, Sacha. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye now.